Good morning and welcome to the Big Bets on Campus live show presented by BetMGM. It is the week one college football betting preview. I hope you're as excited as I am. I am your host, Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my Big Bets on Campus podcast co-host, Collin Wilson, and of course, our own college football insider, Brett McMurphy. We have a lot to get to today. We'll go through four marquee games. We'll give our best bets here in just a second. We'll close out with one other bet each. We'll even get to a round robin underdog moneyline parlay. And we'll bring in the one and only and universally loved Darren Rovell for a market report later on in the show. I do want to remind everyone to make sure that you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can follow all of our picks and get an abundance of data and information for today's games and beyond. Before we get started here with our best bets, Collin, I know you're Arkansas boys, who we'll talk about here in a second, are on the slate today. A big game against Cincy. You excited?
Yeah, I'm uber excited that we have a team that just went to the college football playoffs come down to Donald W. Reynolds Stadium. Although my attention this morning is on the Maine Black Bears taking in a whole bunch of money against a New Mexico team that you and I just trashed in our preseason podcast.
Yeah, FCS movement. You'll see a lot of that on Saturday morning as lines come out with lower limits. All right, let's get things started with our best bets. I'll kick things off with South Florida. I think the line plus 11.5 now. I think anything over 11 is fine against BYU. Tough trip here for BYU weather-wise. You got to deal with the storm, the humidity. Historically, they've struggled down in the state of Florida. I think 1-8 lifetime. I think South Florida has a chance to be one of the most improved teams in the country with all of their returning production and who they added via the transfer portal. There's also some questions about that BYU offense injury-wise. Two of their top receivers are questionable, haven't really been practicing in recent weeks. I think South Florida keeps this game close with an upset shot. Bull horns up with the Bulls. Collin, where you headed?
We need that for our podcast parlay after Old Dominion cashes for us last night. I'm going to pivot and take Arizona plus 6. Listen, Arizona is just flushed with transfer portal talent. They got Jaden DeLora coming in from Wazoo at quarterback. Jacob Cowing, one of the most explosive wide receivers in all group of 5 last year, coming in at wide receiver. We've already seen UTEP have some issues with their offense, not being able to get any scores. That's because Jacob Cowing, as wide receiver, left UTEP and came to Arizona. That's going to be a problem for San Diego State and their brand new stadium tonight, Snapdragon Stadium. But Arizona returns 95% of their pass breakups from last season. Braxton Burmeister, brand new quarterback for San Diego State after being at Oregon, then going to Virginia Tech and exercising his frequent miler Myers. Now he's back on the West Coast at San Diego State. But Arizona plus 6 completely being ignored by the odds makers. This should be more like a pick.
Yeah, I agree. Arizona, similar to South Florida, has a chance to be one of the most improved teams in the country. I think I was losing money betting against Braxton Burmeister in 2017. Justin Herbert got hurt. So I'm looking forward to doing the same 5 years later. Mr. McMurphy, welcome to a new season. Where are you headed today?
Thanks, Duck. I'm going with Florida Atlantic, minus 3.5 at Ohio. Florida Atlantic coach Willie Taggart celebrated his 46th birthday last Saturday in a rout of Charlotte. Sorry, Stuckey. I don't know if that's too soon or not. Star running back Johnny Ford, who didn't play that game, is expected to play this week's game. The Owls also feature quarterback N'Kosi Perry. This is the season opener for Ohio. They only returned 2 offensive starters. Look, Florida Atlantic is much too athletic for Ohio. And also, I don't know if you knew this, Taggart has never lost the week after winning on his birthday. How's that for some research? Give me Florida Atlantic.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as impressed with that win over Charlotte, whose backup quarterback played a lot of games, after seeing Charlotte get blown out at home last night against William and Mary. But Ohio did recently lose its starting running back for the year. And by the way, Brett, you look like a Boca guy with the jacket on this morning. You going to bet on Florida Atlantic every week?
I'm trying to dress up the show a little bit, Stuck. You know, we're moving on up. So bigger and better things are ahead.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to the marquee games of the day. We'll hit 2 in the afternoon to start. We'll begin with the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs in Atlanta, right around 17-point favorites against Oregon, over under sitting around 53. I personally took Oregon here plus 17.5, like them at anything 17 or above. I make this game closer to 13 I think Oregon has one of the few offensive lines in the country that can match up with what will still be a very stingy and dominant Georgia defensive line. But you have to expect some drop, especially early on with the Georgia defense after losing so much talent to the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. There's also the Lanning effect. Dan Lanning, the new head coach at Oregon, obviously came from Georgia, defensive coordinator, very familiar with the offense and defense of Georgia. And I'm sure just from a human perspective, he spent all season coming up with every wrinkle possible to throw the kitchen sink at Georgia in this game. Let's hope we get the good Bo Nix more often than the bad Bo Nix. Give me the Ducks at 17 or higher. Collin, you agree?
I do agree with your side on Oregon, but I'm going to go with the over in this game. And, after you and I got done cutting the podcast and I mentioned the key factor in this was linebacker Noah Sewell and how he's going to grade out against the 3 elite tight ends of Georgia. And if you haven't been paying attention, Georgia has probably the 3 best tight ends. And that's going to be an issue in between the hash marks for every defense this year. And when you go further into Noah Sewell's numbers, he's a great run blocker, not really so much in pass defense. And I think Georgia's going to be able to abuse that and get their points. And then you mentioned Dan Lanning coming into town and Bo Nix being in town. Kenny Dillingham comes in as offensive coordinator. He was Bo Nix's offensive coordinator at Auburn in 2019. And if you go through Nix's career at Auburn, when he had to face Georgia every single year, he was steady, about 220 to 240 yards, never had any turnover-worthy plays. He's not going to be scared of this Georgia defense. It's full of fresh faces. I think he's going to have success. I think Georgia's going to have success. I'll take the over here.
Yeah, it's first time Bo Nix will have an offensive coordinator for a second season, albeit 3 years apart. Brett, what do you got here?
Stuckey, I'm going with Oregon also. I like Oregon, plus 17 and a half. Stuck, I know you thought you'd get the first Media Days reference from Collin, but I'm beating him to the punch. I talked to Oregon coach Dan Lanning at Pac-12 Media Day. I asked him specifically about tempo with new offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham. And he told me, quote, "We won't set any records for our tempo, but you can set tempo in different ways. Our goal isn't to be fast, but to win football games." Look, I don't think they can beat Georgia, but Georgia has to replace about 50 first-round draft picks off that defense. Did I mention I was at Pac-12 Media Days? The Ducks will shorten the game, hang around. Sorry, Collin, I guess this goes against your over, but I think they'll hang around, stay within the 17 points, and maybe give Georgia a scare in the second half.
Look at Brett with a sports coat on, flashing Media Day passes. Still early on week one. All right, that'll do it for our first marquee game. Let's move on to our second. The aforementioned Arkansas Razorbacks are hosting Cincinnati, who of course made the college football playoff for the first time last year. Arkansas around 6.5 point favorite here, over under 54. I like the under here. I think that you're really going to see the loss of Treylon Burks on that Arkansas offense. He was responsible for close to 40% of their explosive passing plays last year. Just so enormous on third downs and in key situations, and stretched out opposing defenses, which made everything, it opened up everything else on that offense. So I think you'll see the impact of his loss, especially in game one. Arkansas will rely on its run game, but I think Cincinnati's defense, which did lose a lot, especially in the secondary, I think their run defense will still be fine. And this is a big step up in class for Ben Bryant if you look at who he's played historically, now going up against an SEC defense. So I like the under here. Collin, it's now your time to shine. Are you going to go homer here? Back your hogs?
I definitely don't want to be poster board material for Sam Pittman at SEC Media Days when he talks about the spread, but I'm going to go with Cincinnati plus 6.5 here. It's a number that I make about 3.5, and I don't think we can accurately justify the loss of Treylon Burks, who's now on the Tennessee Titans roster. He had 88 targets last year. The next closest target was Warren Thompson at 35. Everything from third downs, everything from the red zone. KJ Jefferson would throw into triple coverage, quadruple coverage to make sure Treylon Burks got the target. And he's going to have to replace that in this game. And you just can't do that in one game. Now, of course, Warren Thompson and Jaden Hazelwood can show up, and maybe they'll be the X factors in 6 games from now. But in game number 1 against Cincinnati, when you got an SEC opponent with South Carolina up next, I just don't see a lot of flash out of this Arkansas team. And then the other big story with Arkansas is they're not generating any pressure off the defensive line. They lose their nose tackle and their edge from last year that was creating a lot of pressure. They had so many problems creating pressure in fall camp. They moved to a 4-man front, from a 3-man front to a 4-man. That's going to take one guy out of the secondary, and that's going to make life a little bit easier for Ben Bryant and the Cincinnati offensive line to execute their offense. So I like Cincinnati in this game to keep it close.
The Arkansas offense is dealing with a few injuries over the past few weeks. The offensive line depth is really a question. So if there's an injury early, it could be trouble. Brett, what do you see here?
Collin's picking against Arkansas. Is this big bets on campus or the Twilight Zone? Come on, man. Last season was magical for Cincinnati. However, the clock strikes midnight for Cinderella. This year, Cincinnati has no Desmond Ridder, no Sauce Gardner, and no chance to win on the road against a solid SEC squad. Cincinnati's defense was overpowered last year. Last time we saw them in the playoff by an Alabama team that really wasn't that efficient running the football. They really weren't. That doesn't bode well for Arkansas with KJ Jefferson and running back Rocket Sanders. Arkansas coach Sam Pittman and his wife are known for throwing these elaborate Kentucky Derby parties every year. So let's put this in horse terminology. The Razorbacks simply have more thoroughbreds and pull away at the wire. Sorry, Collin. Woo, pig, suey.
If Arkansas ends up covering Collin next week, I am mandating that you give us a loud woo pig suey call. And if not, Brett, I might make you do it.
Against Spencer Rattler, no problem. I'll be there.
All right, let's move on. Let's take a break in the action. It's halftime and hit our round robin underdog moneyline parlay. A lot of people always ask me which round robin do you do, 2s to 3s. I do 2s to 5s. My goal is to really just hit at least one of these a season, but it all comes down to your risk tolerance. Collin, why don't you kick things off with the round robin?
Yeah, I'm going to go with UTSA plus 160 to get us started. Hey, no Sincere McCormick, no problem. We're going to talk about this game at the end of the show, but I like Meep to get us started.
Yeah, I'm going to go. Look, let's get a big dog in here. Game I already talked about with South Florida. Let's throw the Bulls in there.
Yeah, I'll be short on this one because I think you got it later, but I'm going to do Southern Miss plus 140 here. Just the fact that they have a quarterback and Frank Gore can go back to playing running back, huge upgrade. Defense is electric. Keep your eyes open for Southern Miss this year.
All right, another game that we already talked about, Arizona. Give me the Wildcats, game that I think is closer to a coin flip.
Yeah, and when you do these round robins, I think you always have to have what we call a boat anchor. You have to have a favorite in there that you're pretty positive is going to win, low money line. That way you can tie it to everything else. So your 2s and your 3s tickets get cash. And with that, we're going to do Louisville. I know it's up just a shade under minus 200, but they've blown out Syracuse like every single year in the Malik Cunningham campaign. I can't see him getting tackled at all. Louisville's going to assert their will. You can see it in the spread that's left 3. It's up around 5.5. Louisville to end our round robin parlay.
All right, good stuff there. Let's move on to our final 2 marquee games, both of which are in prime time. We'll start with a highly anticipated matchup in the Swamp. Utah travels to Florida. Florida 2.5-point home dog now. Over under, I think, sitting at 51. I lean Florida here, especially if you can get a 3 or better at some point today and or live. Again, similar to BYU, tough trip for Utah, and it is going to be humid tonight. So weather-wise, something that they're not used to, which could be even a bigger factor in game 1. I'm also a bit worried about that Utah offensive line against the Florida defensive front that has a lot of potential. And Florida with a new coach here, I think that gives them an edge in game 1. Not as much film on what the Billy Napier Florida team is going to look like. They can have some new wrinkles that Utah might not be anticipating. So I like Florida here as a home dog. But Collin, I know you're president of the Salt Lake City chapter of the Utah fan club. So yes. I assume that you're going to back the Utes here.
Yeah, I do like the Utes. Specifically, I'm going to take Utah in the first half on the money line. I believe it's about -1, but whichever bet you want to make there, I'm behind it in the first half. And there's just a lot less questions with Utah because Kyle Whittingham's been the coach there since 2005. Cameron Rising is a dark horse Heisman candidate who knows his weapons on the outside, and he has Tavion Thomas running the ball, one of the best running backs in all of the Pac-12. And you flip over to the Florida side, it's Billy Napier's first year as head coach. And, you mentioned that it's kind of mysterious what they're going to do. I'm not even sure if quarterback Anthony Richardson knows what Florida is going to do because they haven't identified any wide receivers or running backs that can assist him. So I do think the Florida defense is much improved. I think they are going to have a say on the Utah offensive line, but ultimately with a returning experience advantage, with a head coaching advantage, with a coordinator advantage, I'm taking Utah in the first half.
Your beloved Utes taking on your nemesis, Billy Napier. If Florida is blowing out Utah tonight, pray for any Tito's in the vicinity of Collin. Brett, I think spending all that time with Collin at media days, traveling the country, I think he's convinced you to join the Utah fan club based on your preseason bets. Do you agree here?
Well, Stuck, I have a real quick question. You have a lean on Florida. Is that an official pick or only if it wins?
+3. I have them in money line, but if it's +3 or better, sure.
Okay. All right. When we do the bookkeeping next week. Look, Collin's influenced me. I'm sorry. Look, I live about 2 hours south of Gainesville. It's going to be a 7 p.m. kick, 80 degrees, 82% humidity, chance of rain. The Utes will be sweating more than Collin on the 18th tee box at Fossil Trace, trying unsuccessfully, I might add, not to blow a 2-stroke lead against me. Yeah, I won. Unlike Collin, though, the Utes will not fold. The source I talked to this week at Florida told me he just didn't think the Gators roster, quote, lacks a lot. He thinks they're a year away. For the past 6 months, all Utah has heard about is the questions about the weather. Can they handle the humidity? Guess what? Kyle Whittingham's teams are the most physical and well-conditioned teams in the country. I think Billy Napier turns it around at Florida, but I think it's going to take a while. Give me, as Joe Pesci says, the Utes -3.
At second half, 7 p.m. tonight. What's on your main TV? The second half of Florida Atlantic, Ohio, or this game?
No, I'll watch the Gators and the Utes. The Owls will have put it away by then.
All right, let's move on to our final marquee game of the night, also in prime time. Notre Dame against Ohio State. Ohio State 17, I think it's come down to a 16.5 point favorite here, over under sitting around 58.5, 59. This is a pure pass for me. I make this game spot on, like Ohio State 17.1 favorites and total right on. Two things I'm curious to watch. Jim Knowles, I think should provide a massive upgrade for that defense, which just really needed structure and communication against the top teams in the country. Curious to see how quickly he can have a positive impact on that Buckeye defense. And just from an entertainment perspective, Marcus Freeman came out and said, oh, we're 17.5 point underdogs. I'm going to use that as bulletin board material. I didn't know that. Well, just since I don't have any action on the game, I want to see Notre Dame with the ball with like 2 minutes to go down 24 and see how bad Freeman actually wants to cover. I'm sure maybe he's not aware that the line is now gone under 17. So maybe with the ball down 23. Collin, where are you going here?
Yeah, there's definitely some Notre Dame money in the market that's pushed this number back down, but I'm going to go with the under 59 here, which I didn't think was even fathomable. All summer, I've thought about how electric this Ohio State offense is, and why would I take an under in this spot? Ryan Day comes out on Monday at his coaching presser, and he says, we have to establish the run. This game is about us and inserting ourselves on the ground. And that means that Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams are going to get the ball a lot in the first half. I expect in standard downs, first, second, third down, where first down is within reach, that it's going to be a lot of running plays. And although we want to see those fireworks of those wide receivers of Ohio State taking off for CJ Stroud to hit them deep, this is a Notre Dame defense that actually contains explosiveness really well and was one of the top teams in finishing drives. I expect them to actually be probably the toughest defense that Ohio State will see until they play Michigan at the end of the year. You mentioned Jim Knowles coming in. He's already done the game plan for Notre Dame. He did it for the Fiesta Bowl for Oklahoma State. Now, he wasn't there to make in-game adjustments, but he is here to make in-game adjustments now, and he's one of the best in the nation, along with Brent Venables, about making changes within a series. He doesn't need a couple series to shut down an opposing offense. So, this is a lifeless wide receiver crew for Notre Dame. I'm going to go ahead and take the under on this and bank on Ohio State's defensive line dominating a very young Notre Dame offensive line.
Brett, you as a Oklahoma State alum, you're very familiar with the impact Knowles can have on a defense. Where are you going here?
Yeah, I agree with Collin. The difference is going to be the addition of Jim Knowles as Ohio State's defensive coordinator. Last time he faced Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl is at Oklahoma State. He held the Irish to 7 points in the second half. In that loss to Oklahoma State, go Pokes, quarterback Spencer Sanders threw for 371 yards and 4 touchdowns. Spencer Sanders. So what in the world is CJ Stroud and company going to do against the Irish? I think this gets ugly. Buckeyes in a rout.
All right, let's take a break in the action and bring in the one and only Mr. Darren Rovell, who generously has taken a break from his morning card auctions to join us and give us a market report. What's going on, Darren?
Stuck, this is my number one job. Okay. So I just want to let you know that. And my Wildcats, speaking of Irish, are going undefeated today, not playing anyone. All right. Let's give you a little market report, show you what's going on at BetMGM. Not surprisingly, among the most bet games, number one is Notre Dame, Ohio State. Number two, now I thought that the Oregon-Georgia game would be number two, but it's Cincinnati, Arkansas, and then Georgia, Oregon. The most bet teams, again, not surprising, buy tickets. Notre Dame at plus 16, Arkansas at 6.5, even though Collin's going against his own boys. And number three is Ohio State at minus 16. So that game is highly bet, and you got both sides there. And then the most bet teams by money, Arkansas minus 6.5 is number one, Ohio State minus 16, and then Notre Dame plus 16. If you look at some of the interesting things that are happening in other games today, or just to see the number of bets on each side, Michigan, Colorado State moved from 27.5 to 30.5. Still, 79% of the handle is on Michigan. In Oregon, Georgia, moved from, as we said, 17.5 to 16.5. 72% of the money right now on Oregon. And Notre Dame, Ohio State, now at 16. This is an interesting one. 54% of the bets are on Notre Dame, but 51% of the bets of the money are on Ohio State. And the most interesting, most lopsided, this game is a sure bet. It's free money, people. Oklahoma, UTEP. 90% of the money is on Oklahoma, 30.5, and 94% of the money is on the total, the over of 56.5. And I have a little housekeeping here. Big Bets on Campus is presented by BetMGM, the king of sports books, which has some incredible offers for some users. If you've never used BetMGM before, you can use our promo under promo action, ACTION, and you'll get a completely risk-free first bet up to $1,000. Existing users, don't worry, we have you too. If you look in the promo box, you'll see there's a risk-free token up to $25, and you can visit that again in promos on either the site or the app. And stay tuned for more picks to use that free money. Guys, back to you.
Thank you, Darren. Again, that's code ACTION, promo code ACTION, BetMGM, $1,000 risk-free bet for new users. We have one final order of business to get to before we get out of here, and that's just one final pick from each of us. I'll kick things off with Southern Miss plus 3.5 at home against Liberty. Hall ball. I think Southern Miss has a chance to really be improved this year, especially with some of the additions they brought in via the transfer portal. Should have a much steadier quarterback situation. I think Liberty's a bit overvalued after losing Malik Willis. So give me Southern Miss, who, by the way, brought in Liberty's offensive line coach. Could give them a bit of an edge in the preparation department. Collin, give us one final bet.
Go UTSA plus 4. There's a big difference here between experience, where quarterback Frank Harris comes back for UTSA. He knows all of his wide receiver options. They scored, a trio of them scored 25 touchdowns last year. Houston, uber reliant on the transfer portal. Clayton Tune is not going to know anybody after Tank Dell. Just a huge number of options that are trying to vie for the second wide receiver spot. This is going to be a shootout. It's going to be the live betting game of the day. But the difference is the UTSA defense returns 5 of their top 7 tacklers, and they have most of their pass breakups back. That's going to be tough for the Houston offense. I'm going to take UTSA plus 4.
Yeah, should be a fun one. Brett, close us out here. What do you got?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary, The Staircase. If not, it's incredible. Here's a spoiler alert, though, if you haven't. At the end, there's one possibility to describe the murder. It's called the owl theory. It will blow your mind. Here's my owl theory. I started the show with the FAU Owls, and I'll end the show with the Owls of Rice getting 32.5 at USC. Look, team transfer will have little motivation to run it up against Rice. I talked to Lincoln Riley. Did you guys know I was at Pac-12 Media Days? There's no motivation for the Trojans. They got Stanford on deck next week. They'll take it easy on those Owls. Hoot, hoot, go Owls.
Rice should at least try to shorten this game as much as possible and play very slow. And but your Owls are due, by the way. They can't get any worse than last night's performance of Temple. But that feels like a perfect place to end with a recommendation on the electric Rice Owls against
Stuck. I got to get in. Can I get in first? So there is a bet that was made, $1,000 on USC straight up. Any guesses?
To win what?
That if you did not see it, any guesses as to how much that wins?
$3.
$5.
$16.
Wow. All right.
You can't even get a
someone's-
Vegas beer for that.
Yeah, someone's looking to get a couple beers later on tonight. That'll do it for us. Thank you for joining Big Bets on Campus Live, presented by BetMGM. Thanks to Collin Wilson, Brett McMurphy, and of course, Darren Rovell for joining me. Make sure you check out the Big Bets on Campus podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back on Tuesday with a recap of the weekend, and then we'll have 2 more episodes previewing week 2 next week. And of course, Big Bets on Campus Live, presented by BetMGM, will be back same time next week, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, to preview the massive week 2 slate. It's fall Christmas. Merry Christmas. Enjoy the day. Good luck on all of your wagers, and we'll catch you later. Cheers.